Welcome to Tough Lies, the Golfers Podcast with Colin McDougall and Richard Zobel.
Welcome, everybody. It is Tough Lies, the Golfers Podcast. I think I scared Richard there with the opening. It's a 2.5 coffee day, which is a half over my regular limit. So we're fired up today. This is going to be an amazing show. We're going to have Dean Anderson from Epic Recovery on a little later to talk about addiction, specifically as it ties to what we may be seeing with Tiger Woods. That's going to be a really fun conversation. But to get it started, we're going to talk about, I don't know if you know of Richard, but there's a few things going on in golf these days. And we had an interesting week on the PGA Tour at Doral. Some things to unpack there. We had some consistently interesting outcomes on LPGA and the Champions Tour as well. And then we have LIV Golf, which may be dying sooner than we think. So I don't know where you want to start, Richard, but maybe we should welcome you and see how you're doing first.
I'm doing well, and yeah, this past week on the PGA Tour, let's dive into that. I think I want to start with what happened before the tournament started.
Right.
And that was, there were 5 withdrawals from the tournament.
Yes.
Including, and then there was Rory McIlroy, who was missing his second signature series in a row after his Masters win. Yep. And this is a problem that the PGA Tour is going to have to figure out. Yeah. Because with these, and these are 20 million. I never in my wildest dreams did I think a PGA Tour player would ever turn down a $20 million purse. That's guaranteed money. This just goes to show you how evolution of the PGA Tour that it is. And so.
Yeah, 20 million, no cut either, right?
And no cut. That's
70
gotta go.
Some odd guys, you're going to get a check no matter what.
That's got to go. That isn't cutting the mustard at all, because what they need to do is get these fields and reward those who are performing, make it to 120 in the field, and always have a cut. It's part of the culture of the PGA Tour that separates from others. If you don't make the cut, you don't get paid. And so the event's gone back to Doral. Doral, one of the great classic PGA Tour historic events. You know, it's in Miami.
Blue Monster.
Monster. I've played in the Doral, when it was the Eastern Open, and I've played at qualifying school there. The Blue Monster is a bitch, and particularly that 18th hole. And
technical term. Okay. Yeah. Sure.
And, they didn't have any win this past week. Guys like Ray Floyd, Hale Irwin. It was kind of, to some degree, the start of the PGA Tour for those on the West Coast that didn't want to go to East Coast that didn't want to go to the West Coast. Yeah. And European players would always pick up the tour at Doral, Honda, and Bay Hill type of thing. Mm-hmm. So, it's fantastic. But they've got the PGA Tour when they evolve into this contraction, and they have 20 tournaments. They're going to have to make it mandatory that all players play in all the tournaments if they're going to have contraction the way they are. Because, if you're whether you're RBC or whatever, and you're going to contribute $20 million, and in that $20 million, they're going to say to the PGA Tour, and that includes the top 3 players, Scotty, Rory, and now Cameron, right? Yeah. And they're going to say, if they can't answer that with a yes, that's going to be a sticking point to investors. That's going to be a real problem. Yeah. And but it's great to be back at Doral, and it was a very exciting event. Yeah.
So let's continue on with that discussion for a moment. Then we'll talk about Cam Young's win, because let's face it, he won by 6. It's not a super exciting outcome, but on the lines of players withdrawing from an event like this and the forward look of the PGA Tour. This is akin right now, what we're seeing, I think, to what you see in the NBA with load management, where players are taking games off strategically to sort of keep their body in a form. And I wonder, one of the things I hadn't considered before, but in some respects it's certainly obvious. You're not going to have a tour that's 20 weeks in a row, because players aren't going to be able to physically play 20 weeks in a row. So you're going to have to build into that calendar 4, 5, 6 weeks strategically that are meant to be sort of, rest periods for these players. And you're going to have to build some parameters around the events so that, they play in all or most of them. And I think that's, there's a lot of significant implications, because then, you have, when you're talking about other pro sports, it's very rare for there to be, imagine the NFL for a moment, if they took week 12 off collectively, each team shuffles off, they get a bye week, to sort of rest and recover and that sort of thing. And I wonder whether they're going to sort of come up with a formula where they almost preordain who can take what weeks off and when, or
they're going to have
some sort of pre-scheduling meeting with everybody, and it's all sort of planned in a way that maximizes value for sponsors and viewership, and doesn't see the same, handful of top players taking strategic weeks off at the same time.
Yeah, and you get this stretch, and it starts, the Masters, and then our the Heritage Classic thereafter it, and then 2 signature series, Miami, and now they're in the Truist, and then they go into the PGA. That's just too high in intensity.
Yeah,
they got to break that up. They've got to go in there and put them into groups of 3 weeks or under, and with time off. They have to do that, or else.
And what about right the week after? I mean, a lot of times people feel drained coming out of the major. They don't want to play the next week, right? Rory took the Heritage off, for example. He won the Masters, and he's like, I'm not going to Hilton Head.
He took the Miami tour, 2 in a row. They're signature series, so it's kind of like, whoa, this is they will figure it out. There's enough weeks in the year where they can slide in those off weeks for everybody, so they can rest and recuperate if the contraction is going to work. So. But my natural inclination is what's gonna fill those off weeks, which maybe we'll circle back on that point and talk about it as it is contextualized with what we are seeing unfold with LIV Golf. For a moment, let's talk about what happened on the PGA Tour. Cam Young won going away. It was nice to see him take a week off from the Tuscaloosa 300 race that I always think he looks like a NASCAR driver. I'm sorry. It's like every time I see him, I'm like, that guy just does not look like a pro golfer. He looks like the guy who is wearing the coveralls and is driving a NASCAR at 500 miles an hour. So your thoughts and reflections on the week on tour? Well, yeah, and even though he won by 6 and he was always having a 6 or a 7 shot lead, I am loving the fact to watch how he is evolving. Cameron Young is now moving into the position to join kind of Rory and Scotty Scheffler as top players, and not just because he's won the Players Championship, and then this past weekend.
And Fitzpatrick, I'd put him in that group too.
Yeah, he's close.
Yeah,
but what's really separating Cam Young from this is how he's managing himself when he's becoming more and more stoic than he was prior. Right. And the example like this, when he had a tough break in the second hole where he called a penalty on him shot, that's interesting as it has very high integrity, which tells where he is from a comfort level in his mental health perspective.
Calling Patrick Reed.
When they were playing lift, clean, and place, and he says he put it up on a tee on a piece of grass, and then he touched the ground, then his ball moved. Right. And then when the officials came around and said, do you think you caused, he goes, I don't know. As soon as he answers that way, he's going to take either the low ground, the Patrick Reed route, or the high ground, which is what he did, and then it empowered him because of his high integrity. He makes a par. He goes on to win. Yeah. It's fantastic stuff. And what I did, I want to read this. This I put out on Twitter yesterday. So Smiley Kaufman on the Golf Channel, he's broadcasting, and he makes this claim. He says, Cameron Young's putting, what a weapon his putter has turned into. And I said, I beg to differ. Cameron Young's weapon is now his mindset. His putting is just another shot to perform, and he's good at all of them. He has a massive amount of acceptance, which in turn provides him the freedom to pursue what he wants. Freedom is the key, is freedom to perform is the key. Having a high level of acceptance won't guarantee victory, but it'll increase his chances. Young accepted the penalty on the second hole. These things happen from time to time. He accepted whatever the outcome is. And this is what, then I gave credit, he is working with Dr. Brett McCabe. And these are the things that he's really, if any player gets the ability to have the freedom to play, to detach emotionally from the results, like what a bad break I got here. A lot, what would Jordan Spieth be doing in that situation?
Right.
We would be listening to him complain like crazy how unfair this game is, which is a lesson that he needs to get. But I was happy. I'm so happy to see Cameron Young be maturing into this level of such a great player, and it's because of his new condition mindset. This is the MindTRAK moment that you can watch and learn and learn how to deal with those outcomes that we don't like.
Yeah, I love that. I do want to circle back too on this. I feel like we're doing through lines from today, but I do want to when we get to the second half of our discussion after Dina, I do want to ask you, because I had my own tournament experience this past weekend, and I think it ties into what you just mentioned. But I did want to get into two other sort of really impressive things going on in golf. I mean, I just think it's being so underplayed right now. Nelly Korda won it again by 4, and Stuart Sink won again by 3, and in the regions, right? So, like, they are they're playing at a level that is really impressive to watch. And I just, in my mind, I guess, I'm a consumer of golf media like lots of people. I just don't see either of those stories really bubbling up to the top. And I feel like we're these other subject areas are important to discuss. Of course, what's happening with LIV and the PGA Tour is important, but what we're seeing on those other circuits with some really great talents is really impressive to watch as well.
Yeah, and again, Nelly Korda is so far and away better than the rest of the ladies out there on the LPGA. And I think she's showing it now. She's starting to feel more and more comfortable, as we talked about. She's getting more comfortable with these big leads. She's going to become very comfortable with it. As it relates to the Champions Tour, Stuart.
Yeah.
Stuart Sink. His game, like, he's fresh off the PGA Tour.
Yeah.
And if your game at 50, when you turn 50, is strong, that you can play well on the and compete on the PGA Tour, and then you move up to the Champions Tour, that's like taking a gun to a knife fight. So Stuart will be, his skill level compared to the aging, his peers, he's the strongest, but he's going to be going into the aging thing too. And this happens. Ray Floyd did the same. Ray Floyd won PGA Tour events when he was 50. That's how good he was. So, this is what I think where the gap is. And Stuart he's gotten a lot longer in the past 3 years as he's turned 50. But I think his ability is so much stronger than the rest of the guys on the Champions Tour.
Yeah, it's very impressive to watch the level that he's playing at right now, and confidence out the wazoo. And I think, it's really, really impressive. Okay, so I did want to touch on the news of the day vis-a-vis LIV Golf. Sort of more news about sort of that they're now looking at, how do we survive the non-renewal of the PIF funding. Is it possible for them to carve a future for themselves after, the sort of incredible sustained losses over their history? And, if so, how that might take shape. They have hired some turnaround experts. Your thoughts on, can they pull this off? And if so, how might they?
Well, yeah, it's a lot of people are going, okay, I told you so. Now that the spigot has been turned off from the public investment fund of Saudi Arabia to fund the $1 billion per year losses that they had with LIV in the past 5 years. So it's going to be interesting. So last week, Yasser El Rumayyan, he stepped down as chairman of the LIV Tour, and he's also the chairman of PIF.
Right.
And then there were a couple other guys, a guy by the name of Eugene Davis and John Zinman. These guys are Wall Street, probably in the form you could call them sharks, that they look at these insolvent situations in companies and they go in to inflate them in some way or some manner, and they deal with troubled insolvent businesses.
Right.
And LIV is a troubled insolvent businesses. I don't know, and you may give me some pushback on it, but I don't know. After you kind of take the top 175 PGA Tour players and then the next 150 Corn Ferry Tour players about talent, these guys are going to go and try and raise money. I can't imagine they're going to be able to raise the money that PIF put into it. That's just not a rational thought. But they probably will raise some kind of money, and then who are the people that are going to play on that tour? Right. That's what my thinking is how are they going to entice people to leave the PGA Tour and the Corn Ferry Tour and then the PGA Tour. This is going to come full circle. Is now that that LIV has gone away, the PGA Tour, are they on a track for unsustainability with these large $20 million purses? Is there going to be a correction in that market, and will they pull them back down? Because one thing that will happen is private equity will find out where that margin lays and tell them where they're going to have to put their money.
Yeah. I have a few thoughts I would share sort of high level. First, there would be there has been a tremendous amount of investment in physical assets, I'm sure, to execute tournaments for LIV, so seating and VIP and all that sort of stuff. So there are some physical things that they can put to use, I'm sure. They would also have, they did have some improvement in their base of revenues with sponsorships with Rolex and so forth. So they're not starting with nothing necessarily, I would say. And I think, yes, are the players who are currently on the PGA Tour and those on the Corn Ferry Tour likely to defect like had happened? No, but there's a whole bunch of players that are going to be have a very bumpy road either back to the PGA Tour, or they're high level players but just don't have a place to really play. And so what that sort of shakes out to be. And I would also say there are some markets, North America, not one of them, where LIV was very successful. Adelaide, Australia, South Africa. There are places in the world where they were embraced wholeheartedly. And I think what was interesting in my research this week was they were definitely trying the model that Rolap was discussing as well, which is to say offering sort of market franchises, and treat it in the same way that you might see other professional leagues operate. So I do think that I keep going back to, there's 52 weeks in the year. The PGA Tour is going to be consuming 20 to 26 of them between majors and events. Yep. There are more players playing at a very high level. I think, quick example, we just saw what Alex Fitzpatrick, who did not have a PGA Tour card until this week, he had no difficulty competing at the same level as the PGA Tour. Yeah. Right?
But keep in mind the PGA Tour owns the DP World Tour and the Corn Ferry Tour.
I'm just saying, I think there's a perception that they would say, well, he's on the DP World Tour, he's not as good as those on the PGA Tour, right?
Well, it's a good indication how deep it is that the PGA Tour controls.
And so to me, it's sort of like, you have a lot of people who are playing at, the margin in terms of the level of play, I think is very thin. It's just making, and it's a lot easier. It's like a lot of things. It's a lot easier to stay on the PGA Tour than it is to get there. for many players. Like, especially when you get to a level where you're playing in these events where there's no cuts, and you come 20th and you got a goal that's gonna help you.
Here's my question to you now: is on these the returning members program? How do you think this is going to unfold? I've got some thoughts, but give me yours, Colin.
I think it's going to be chaos.
What do you think should happen?
Oh, that's a good question. My quick answer to it would be, I like the path. It may become clear, I'm not a fan of Patrick Reed in any way, shape, or form. But watching him go through this journey to earn his way back on the tour,
he's got an important place on the PGA Tour. The bad guy.
He's gonna earn his way back. And I think the simplest answer is, you gave up your PGA Tour card. You have to start once again from in the same status as anybody else, no matter who you are. For me, I would rather see it John Rahm, Bryson DeChambeau, whatever it is. You want to be able to. You're gonna earn your way back.
Well, yeah, and keep in mind, there's only a few that gave up their membership.
Right.
Only a few. So,
right.
Do you want to hear what my thoughts are on this?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Well, I'm with you. You have to earn your way back. I think that the precedent is set, even though they said that it's not precedent setting on this returning membership program. How Koepka and Patrick Reed are coming back. I think you have to look at every individual player individually and whether they want to come back or not. So there's a number of players that have a pre-existing exemption. John Rahm, Bryson DeChambeau, Cameron Smith. If you look back at their major championship, it carries over. And if they sat out a year, they still have, they're still exempt players on the PGA Tour, but they're persona non grata. They're not members in good standing because they have penalties, and they have to figure out this. Now, Brooks Koepka, we all know, paid $5 million, and he was able to come back after sitting out a year as well. But I think these guys now, if you're John Rahm and Cameron Smith, and you're coming back and you chose not to take that olive branch that was offered to them, now if they want to come back, then I think that penalty, instead of 5, it needs to go to $10 million. These guys are making a lot more, and they need a year to sit out. And they have to have a pre-existing exemption if they want to go play. So everyone's going to have to go through Thomas Dietrich. He would still be on his exempt list from having won the Phoenix Open, the Waste Management Phoenix Open. So it allows him. If you are one of those players that have rescinded your PGA Tour membership, like Sergio, then if you want to come back, you go to the back of the qualifying school. None of these guys should come back. They should, if they have a pre-existing exemption, they should be able to take advantage of it. If they get back in good standings as members, pay their fine, sit out their time, and then go which would allow them to play. If you don't have any category, you're back at the qualifying school in the Corn Ferry Tour and the PGA Tour qualifying school to see if you can earn your way back, and that's just how life should work.
Yeah, earn your way back, and I think one of the byproducts, interestingly, I think it'll bump some of the ratings of those Corn Ferry events. But I think we're going to cut it there because we got to make room for our guest. So we're going to be right back with more Tough Lies. Make sure to like, follow, subscribe, tell your friends, stop people in parking lots, do whatever you need to do to get them on board with supporting us here at Tough Lies, the Golfers Podcast. Our website, toughliespodcast.transistor.fm. Instagram, @Tough Lies Podcast. And we're going to be right back with Dean Anderson from Epic Recovery.
This episode of Tough Lies is brought to you by TrueSpec AI Yardage Intelligence. Most golfers use GPS. Smart golfers use data. TrueSpec pairs high-resolution course mapping with AI-powered shot strategy. Through a mobile app that knows exactly where you are on the course, current wind conditions, elevation change, and most importantly, your shot tendency. It doesn't just tell you the number, it recommends the club, the target, even the smart miss. All you have to do is execute. TrueSpec, AI Yardage Intelligence, because strategy should be automatic, pressure is not.
Well, we're back. Great conversation. I'm super pleased to have a good friend and for me, the person I I couldn't think of as a better resource to try to understand what we at least think we're seeing with Tiger Woods of late. My friend Dean Anderson of Epic Recovery. I'm going to give a quick introduction, and I've got some really dumb questions, but then hopefully it'll lead to some insightful questions in terms of what we're seeing. So Dean Anderson, Epic Recovery, certified addiction counselor, a master practitioner in clinical counseling. He's got lots of experience across withdrawal management, residential treatment, and trauma-informed care. He works as a clinical supervisor, a consultant, and a private counselor, and he brings a lived experience and professional expertise in addiction and recovery. So please welcome to Tough Lies, Dean Anderson. How are you, Dean?
I'm wonderful. Thank you for having me, Colin and Richard.
Yeah, so good to be with us. So good to have you with us, I should say. And I think I want to get into the discussion around Tiger Woods, but I want to start first with, as I mentioned, the dumb question. So how do we characterize addiction in general? Like, what is the sort of the simple way to answer the question, what is addiction?
Well, the best way I can define it is it's more of a human affliction. It's the idea of risk and reward and impulse control that in our current state of defining addiction, it's usually more about substance use disorder than it is about addictive behavior. But I was talking earlier about it. More so, it is the idea of losing impulse control and doing something regardless of the consequences, but continuing to do that behavior. There are criteria within the diagnostic manuals, and there's all these different things that you can do to checklists and assessments and screeners. But the easiest way to say it is you keep doing something, even though it has negative impacts on your life and it causes more harm to what you're doing. And that could be from drinking coffee to opioid addiction to a whole golf. How many times have you sacrificed something in your life to go play around the golf? And in doing so, we could constitute that as addictive behavior.
Yeah.
I heard this one time, I think it was my golf coach at Brigham Young University. He said, the greatest pleasure is satisfying an addiction. And I don't know whether that has any kind of truth to it, or is it a wives' tale, or what? But that stuck with me. And then also too, is I mentioned earlier that I had a form of an addiction in my prime of my career, and I stopped it. And every morning when I woke up, I had to have some, espresso coffee with a lot of sugar, and then I dipped Copenhagen under my lip, and I'd put a big lip full of Copenhagen before I got in the shower. And then I said, this is crazy. That's far too much drug, too much nicotine, caffeine, and sugar. So I eliminated the sugar and the nicotine. I kept the coffee, but eliminated the sugar and the tobacco products.
Mm-hmm. So I like that saying, but here's what I would like to consider. As often as pleasure seeking in its infancy, it's about the idea of this feels good, I'm going to do this because it feels right. As it transitions into addiction, often it turns into self-medication. So it's no longer about pleasure seeking. It's more about starving off withdrawal or getting rid of unwanted emotional states. So then when what you're talking about, that quote that your friend said or your old coach said, it's more about the greatest pleasure is the alleviating of one's suffering. So that when addiction becomes taking away my suffering, then nothing feels better than solving my own suffering. So I can see where that would make sense. Yeah. However, not in a pleasure-seeking way, more of a self-medication way.
Yeah, the 10 days of trying to stop caffeine, the headaches, the withdrawals that came with it, and then there was a breakthrough on that, I suppose, is what you're talking about.
Yeah, and then your first sip of caffeine after that is the greatest reward because you're alleviating that suffering. And you see it with addiction all the time. And then people are like, try to stop, and they try to this, and then they end up getting a bigger reward from alleviating that suffering of not having the thing, and it reinforces the addictive behavior.
Now, while I'm sipping my next sip of coffee, before I do that, I should say, I want to set us up for the conversation I really want to have with you. I think it's important first to say we don't know with absolute certainty that this is what Tiger Woods is dealing with, and I want to make sure that's really clear. We have our observations. We have, I would say most recently, what seems like a track record of behavior that's just has grown. And there's some video evidence based on what we saw that I think we could at least have a window into what we are seeing. So qualify this conversation by this is, we believe that Tiger Woods is having some challenges with addiction. We don't know with certainty. But more broadly, I think this sort of conversation can be had about athletes in general, and some of the key insights that I'm hoping that you'll bring, Dean. So let me just set it up, in terms of the chronology of Tiger Woods. He had the episode way back in 2009. He had a car crash in 2021 in Los Angeles, suffered some serious leg injuries. He didn't die from that. Yeah, lucky he didn't die. He had his most recent crash, which included a DUI arrest. He failed the roadside sobriety test, which you can watch the camera footage of, the body cam footage online. He was found to have pills in his pocket. During that, he's had seven back surgeries. Across the board, and all of which I am sure come with, pain treatment and so forth. We're also talking about, of course, one of the most, if not the most accomplished golfer in history. He's a global phenomenon, a superstar with tremendous orientation, I would say, towards protecting his own privacy. And with all of that contextually behind sort of the discussion we're going to have, I wanted to start with, understanding the intersectionality between having somebody who is of this sort of, high level athletic orientation and addiction. Like, are people in those sorts of circumstances more or less prone to falling prey to addiction? Is it part of their personality type? What should we sort of understand about those sort of pieces of the puzzle?
Okay, hold on to your breath.
Well, I sipped my coffee.
That's a lot to unpack, Colin. Lots of
right.
pieces. Can I say that people in these situations are more prone to addiction's unbiased, and it falls in all different realms? But we do see that there is often an influx in substance use disorder and or addiction in states of high stress or increased amounts of emotional dissatisfaction or feeling unsafe. So in participating in being in the global stage, I would like to assume that there's a state of, being under the microscope. And there's often people I've dealt with in the past who are musicians and or sports players who being under the constant eye and being under the microscope causes a sense of emotional or social dissatisfaction or safety in that. And it's hard for us to recognize what that means. Because we would say, that would be great to be rich and famous, but at the same time, the idea of losing those core values of privacy and autonomy and those things would certainly have an impact on how a person copes. And then you talk about Tiger having all of these surgeries. You add some physical discomfort into the equation, and it's easy enough to say, I can self-soothe for my physical problem. But it's been shown scientifically that opioids, what we're talking about, also soothe emotional pain equally as much as physical pain. So when someone ends up taking an opioid for physical pain or pain management, it very quickly turns into, that actually helped my emotional pain too, helped me feel safe, helped me feel comforted and at ease, or away from the pressures of the press and the media and the tour or whatever else it may be. And then inadvertently it solves a problem that wasn't intended to, and that's where addiction starts to come in, because it's a maladaptive strategy used to take care of one thing instead of the other thing. So what I mean by that is, if I have emotional dissatisfaction, I feel unregulated, I feel unsafe, the obvious response to that would be an adaptive response, which is go feel safe or go feel connected. And addiction is a substance that's giving me perceived idea of feeling safe, therefore managing the emotional problem, but doesn't fix it in the long run, so therefore maladaptive and turning into another problem. And often this is where addiction lies, in that maladaptive coping piece, that people end up using a substance to manage their well-being in some other way. Was that a good enough?
Yeah, very helpful.
Okay.
Yeah. So go ahead, Richard, if you got a question.
Well, yeah, it seems as though, there's athletes that fall into these problems. Also from the music industry, we see this more often, or the entertainment industry. If you're a rock and roll superstar and you're getting, in those situations of high performance, and you're having such a blissful in your performance that, times when you become irrelevant type of thing, sometimes and I'm asking the question, is this more relevant in, say, other aspects like the music business, particularly rock and roll business for the past 30, 40 years, than the athlete side of performance?
So here's how I like to look at it, Dick, is there's a biological component, there's a social component, there's a cognitive component, there's an emotional component, even a spiritual component to everybody's quality of life. And all of us are going to weigh them differently within our values, within our social structures, within all of the different pieces. And over time, we've seen and accused so many different things of being an addiction problem. Maybe it's just peer pressure, maybe it's access, maybe it's socioeconomic, maybe it's a moral failing. Like, we have all of these different things that we put into play. And the reality that we're seeing now is it's usually just an imbalance in the person's life, and however that thing will fill in the void will fill in the void. So when you're talking about a rock star, the social components of sex, drugs, and rock and roll is huge. So to be a good rock star means drugs is part of the trifecta, right?
It's in the brochure.
It's in the brochure, and it's also part of a deviant lifestyle. And I don't mean deviant in the way of like bad person. I mean, like, if I see the world as valuing my deviance and my pushing against social structure, then I have to therefore do that to fit in that need. So there's all these different pieces to that, which makes sense. When there's also an underlying emotional incapacity to manage those things, addiction falls in. So then it goes, I just meant to explore and participate and meet those needs of being a rock star, but I also had some childhood trauma, or I had some emotional dysregulation, I had some other things going on in my life that helped me feel disconnected. And sure enough, the drugs from the sex, drugs, and rock and roll fit in perfectly. Sometimes it's actually just sex, or just drugs. Either way, these things that fall in, it can be a multitude of things that fill those gaps. And everyone is vulnerable to that. It just manifests in a different way because of how it portrays itself under the microscope. So a sports player versus a rock star, and their drug of choice may be different, right? So going out and playing concerts and staying up all night and doing that, you're probably not using opioids because you're falling asleep on stage. You're probably using a stimulant or something to keep you awake, to keep you rocking and rolling. So it depends on what the drug is doing as well.
And do genetics play a role in this? Do some people become more addicted, or can become addicted than others?
They've done some studies to say that there are indicators that people are more likely to have addiction if they have certain genetic traits. But at the same time, we're in a world where we can see epigenetics, so genes can be changed from generation to generation based on experience, and we're seeing intergenerational trauma, so those things can get passed down from mother to child. In the genes now, but at the same time, we also see that there's a lot of people that don't have addictive behaviors who have the genes. So it doesn't mean because you have it, it's not like blue eyes. It's not like dad had it, mom didn't, so therefore you do. It doesn't work like that. But there's a likelihood, right? And then there's also the nurture over nature. Did it come from genes, or did it come from my parents' substance use, or their mental health, or their incapacity to be available when I was younger? So there's the jury is out, and there's no certainty in any of that. The only certainty we're sure of is that it's a human condition that is unbiased.
I love this discussion. So I wanted to tie my next question to something you just said, but also sort of frame it in a way that I think we can hopefully draw some further insight. So you said earlier sort of that feeling of unsafety or feeling unsafe. I mean, one of the things that Richard and I have talked about before is, this is a guy who's got endless amount of money. He could have a driver, like take him around in a vehicle. He doesn't need, and here we've seen multiple incidences where, it seems to me that he feels so unsafe having been burned, quote unquote, in the past from a media perspective. And I think he probably doesn't feel like he can trust very many people at all, given his stature in the world. And I just wonder if we're watching someone who feels so unsafe. I mean, famously, his yacht is named Privacy. And I just wonder whether that is sort of at the core of what we're seeing. We're seeing somebody who's just doesn't feel like they can cope, or is feeling very, very unsafe, and is sort of turned towards these opioids, where these options to soothe that feeling of a lack of safety. Does that seem to make any sense?
I really enjoyed your precursor to this conversation about the understanding of we don't have any certainties in this, and we'll hypothetically talk about it.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Here's the way that I see it, Colin. Is we all have a set of core values within inside of us, and the core values that are inside of us tell us what's important in the world. And anytime one of those things that are important get threatened, if it's honesty, if it's integrity, if it's finance or whatever, if it's family, anytime any of those things become threatened or maybe taken away from me, the byproduct is fear, it's anxiety, it's worry, it's those are the emotions that come with that. As an individual who is on the world stage winning competitions at 12 years old, his value for privacy goes right to the top of the list. It's the same as my, I value autonomy, and I value having my freedom and doing what I want. And I didn't realize how much until I got into a long-term relationship that I really did value that, because it wasn't at a commodity anymore. So the minute that you take that commodity away, it increases in value. So now you take a gentleman who his whole life is under the microscope, and he values that privacy, and then he's going to take it anywhere he can get it, even at the risk of other safeties or other values in the process of getting that need met. And every time they're threatened, every time you end up on the news or somebody's looking into your business, it gets taken away. And I can see why you would have a yacht named Privacy.
Yeah. And I wanted to also ask, while we have you, what is the role of the people around him? In the sense of, I feel like for a lot of us, we have at least one or two or a few people who will be unafraid of the consequences of calling us out for our behavior whenever it might go askew, let's say. And I wonder about when you have that kind of stature, it is very easy to surround yourself, especially when your parent, your main role model in life has long passed away. There's a tendency, I think, to try to surround yourself with, for lack of a better word, sycophants, people who will tell you what you want to hear all the time. And I wonder all the way along, like, who will he possibly listen to in order to find the path forward that is going to really be to his long-term benefit?
I think you're right, and it's easy enough to end up in those spaces. When we're looking at emotional safety and the capacity to feel safe, sure enough, somebody poking at my insecurities or my shame or those things that I don't like looking at is certainly difficult, and it's really hard to have people around intentionally that are going to poke at the things that aren't working in your life. Nobody's good at that. It turns out being the people that poke at those things are the people that have some blood relation or have some investment in you that then get the capacity to do those things. But if I get to choose who I get to have in my life, I'm probably taking the path of least resistance and avoiding some of those things.
Right.
And often in this scenario in addiction, it usually turns into a lived experience individual, someone else who has been through it, somebody who doesn't have a vested interest in the outcome, who then wants to share their own experiences. So this is a big part of how AA works and has worked for 90 years for some people. A couple of people in the room and start talking about their similar downfalls and the things that have happened in their life, and all of a sudden they start being like, okay, I can face my own stuff because you did, or you're showing me how to do it. And it's not often pointing at your problem, it's pointing at my own problem and me seeing mine in you. Right. You don't see John Lennon, Robert Downey Jr., you see some of these famous people, they have sponsees and they have people that they look up over and take care of, and Eminem, they have people within their industry that they look to understand each other and what they went through, not necessarily looking for guidance to be told what to do, but just saying, oh, you went through that too. That is normally a path of least resistance for shame. It takes away some shame. It's like, oh, I can see me and you. And then they have the capacity to move forward. Somebody who is either struggling with feeling better than or less than somebody else is going to really struggle with that sameness that takes away shame.
It's interesting that you say that, Dean, and using it in kind of the experience in the golf world. David Faraday had a full disclosure on his alcoholism, and he was very open. It's just his nature. Yeah. And he tells a wonderful story. In fact, he was up in Canada commentating for an exhibition with Jack Nicklaus and Tom Watson and I think Gary Player type of thing. And he just went on a bender for a long period. And as they were in the process of doing their performance, Tom Watson went up to David Faraday and he put his arm around him. He goes, "You're hurting, aren't you?" And David goes, "Yes, I am." He's like at the brink of his alcoholism. And David Faraday said to Tom Watson, how do you know? And he says, "When I look in your eyes, I see myself." And that's when Tom Watson came out of the closet, and like they had no idea. He'd drink a bottle a day apparently, but no one had any idea, and his peers in the locker room, that Tom Watson had an alcohol problem. And so it's great to see these people who unlike that are full disclosure, are able to put it out there, and perhaps maybe that helps them if they're able to express it like Tom did, and he got help himself.
Yeah. The shame and stigma that is attached to substance use disorder assumes moral failing or deviancy or some medical problem, and then in that it creates more separation and disconnection. And every time somebody says "me too" or steps into that idea of recognition,
they're sharing
it takes away some of the shame, because we're sharing the same problem. We're sharing the same thing, which is the antidote to shame, connection, right? And people will see that within there. So that's a great story. Thanks, Dave. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, amazing. So I think we're going to leave it there. I certainly don't think this will be the last conversation we're going to want to have with you on this subject. And I think it's just in part because I don't, as we said off the top, we don't really truly know what we're dealing with when it comes to Tiger Woods. We also, I think, are living in a world where there's a lot of top tier athletes that are dealing with heavy duty issues like this, that will, in the golf world, certainly it will pop up time to time. And I would love it if we could have you back to talk about this even further. And I suspect, I guess I would want to ask one last question, and that would be more forward looking. And that would be sort of, what are some signals, again, with the assumption that we are seeing with Tiger what are some signals about him, or more broadly about people in positions like that we as observers could take in and really say, oh, okay, he or she seems to be on the right path forward with what they're dealing with, and we can hope that they're sort of on the right road ahead.
Good question. When I figure that one out and I have a book worth $1 billion, it's the way I like to measure it, Colin, is I measure it in the state of quality of life. When you see individuals who are participating in a balanced quality of life, and I know it's really hard to look at from somebody you can't see day to day, But in the day-to-day interactions with people we care about and love, you'll see that they're participating in a balanced quality of life. They're eating and diet and exercise, have some sense of balance to it. And addiction is an imbalance. It's an imbalance in life that puts all of things into one category, and then it causes the ecosystem to be out of whack. So when an individual is getting healthy, we really want to look at, is their ecosystem balancing out? Are they finding healthy strategies and things that they're participating in life to help them to participate in a meaningful way, whatever it means to them? But each person's balance is different when it comes to physical, mental, emotional, psychological needs. There can be different spiritual needs as well. So when we're looking at an individual, really we should be saying, are they well in a holistic way? Are they managing life in the way that makes sense? And you'll see that through the byproduct of them not managing well is behavior. It usually comes out in dysfunctional behavior. It comes out in isolation and separation and emotional shutdown and or not participating mentally, emotionally, physically. You can see it in a person in their behaviors and how they're trying to balance that lifestyle out. But when they have quality of life and they're doing well, they're present, they're participating, they're usually engaging, they're usually communicative and those sort of things. You let me know when you get Tiger Woods' private cell number and he's on the up and up.
You never know. He may well tune into these important conversations on Tough Lies. That's what the show is about, and certainly a good way to conclude our conversation. So Dean Anderson, epicrecovery.ca. An amazing discussion. It's just what I was hoping for by having this conversation. I think people listening will really, really benefit from the dialogue, and I want to say thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, Dean, thank you very much. That was very enlightening.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Have a great show.
Okay, thanks. We'll be right back with more Tough Lies. Well, welcome back to Tough Lies, the Golfers Podcast. What a great discussion with Dean Anderson. I mean, very, very insightful. I'm sure we'll have him on again. I hope our audience really appreciate it. I think it's really, really interesting stuff. I did want to follow up with you. Like, one of the things for me, Richard, as an observer of the tour, you lived it, would be there has to have been other people on the professional tour who faced similar personal challenges along the lines of addiction as what we think we're witnessing with Tiger Woods.
Sure, there were a number of players on the PGA Tour. Today there was it was at a point where people on tour would make a joke that the sports psychologist that I'm dealing with is Chivas Regal. That's my psychologist type of thing. So back in the day, in the earlier days, our best known player, George Knudson, we watched him, chain smoke cigarettes, and he had an addiction to obviously tobacco, and he was a chain smoker. And 50 years old, he unfortunately found out he had lung cancer, and by 51 he had passed away. But there was another addiction that George had that it was talked about quite a bit back in the day, not so much, and it was his drinking problems. He had an addiction to alcohol, and he wasn't able to solve that, as far as I know. But George Archer tells me a story, and George Archer, keep in mind, George Archer won the 1969 Masters, where George Knudson finished tied for second with Billy Casper and Tom Weiskopf. So George Archer is telling me this story. He said, playing at Desert Inn in Las Vegas. The old Desert Inn was, on the Strip. And then if your room backed up the windows, you'd see the pool. And then the golf course, Desert Inn Golf Course, where, the tour played there for so long. And George Archer is telling me that he's paired with George Knudson, and this is Wednesday, the night before the event, and they finished practicing, and George Archer was coming into the room, and he was closing the blinds, and he notices, he's looking out the window, and he sees George Knudson sitting in a lounge chair with his spikes on and his golf attire, and sitting there having a sip of a beverage, and he just closes the blinds, and he heads out for dinner. He comes back from dinner, it's 9:00, and looks through the blinds, and George Knudson is still on this lounger right there. And he knows that, they got a tee time at 7:00 in the morning, and Knudson's still sitting there. And then George wakes up at 5:00, and he opens his blinds, and he sees down, and George Knudsen is still in the lounge chair awake, and he's, and he's going, what the hell is going on here? So George Archer's got his eye on Knudsen hitting balls. They're playing together. They got the first tee time and on the putting green, and then Archer gets up and they call them to the first tee, and George Archer hits his tee shot, and then the announcer goes, please welcome from Canada, George Knudsen. George Knudsen gets up, he tees the ball up like that, and the sun is coming right up above the first fairway, and right blaring into your eyes. And George takes a waggle, looks down the fairway, goes back, takes another waggle, looks down the fairway, brings his head back, he bends over, picks up the ball, and says, call the first alternate. He withdraws from the tournament right there and then. And George Archer, and this is, there's a number of stories, and we don't get a chance to hear them, nor should they be public, perhaps. But unfortunately, George Knudsen had these addictions. The smoking one that killed him, and the drinking one that was really, and he's always wearing these sunglasses, and he liked to be in the bar, in a dark bar, wearing the sunglasses, and he was Rivs McBee said he was always by himself, and I think he. What he struggled with was that life balance. He didn't have, his attention. He didn't like being on tour when he was on tour, and he didn't like being at home when he wasn't on tour. So those are the things that are very telling and interesting subject. Yeah.
Very, very interesting. Okay, so we're gonna wrap up here, but before we do, I on my personal golf journey here that we're on, I couldn't help but want to sort of ask you this. I played in another local tournament. Shout out to 12 Sticks, who put on these wonderful local amateur events for guys like myself, and played a tournament at Black Mountain, which was a course I hadn't played before. So I was playing it, it's very target oriented, tight, narrow, fun. But as I was playing, I had a good front nine, and I was pretty certain I was going to be sort of in contention, let's say, albeit for obviously a much smaller event. And I have a new putter, which I've been working on, and it's shown some improvement. But my mental process on the back nine, I think, sort of failed me. And I'll describe for me what it was. This is my therapy moment, or guidance moment. But basically, I was standing over putts on the back nine, and I'm going, well, I've made all of them so far. Surely I'm going to miss one. And I just was like, and of course I did, right? And missed a couple of them, and ended up coming sixth instead of first or second. And I was curious sort of where the gap in my thoughts might have been.
All that from the start to the finish there, like you, at the end of that conversation, you, instead of saying I finished sixth instead of first, second, like those are all future projections.
Yes. Yeah.
They're future projections. And you have to develop an awareness like this and catch yourself in these moments. So the fact that you said, well, I've made all of them to this point, so therefore I must be certain that I'm going to miss them. That's a future projecting onto what might or might not happen. So you are conditioned this way. Yeah. In order to recondition yourself out of that, you have to be aware that this is what you're doing. And when you do it, just say, change the channel, stop, say, reboot back to this shot, whether it's a putt, you have to assess and execute. It's always having the awareness, let yourself know you'll make the correction. You don't have to go, you don't bad talk yourself or cuss yourself out. Just say, whoop, stop, go back to this putt, assess and execute. Is something that you can control, and you have to kind of disrupt those conditioned responses. And then now when you go back, you're still in that conditioned response where it's about results, and you say, well, I finished sixth and I should have been or could have been, or those things have no place in it, and that is reinforcing a bad perspective. So you've got to change your perspective, and that's what you do, is reboot to every shot. Can I assess this shot? Can I execute it and go do it, and then measure your performance that way?
Love it. No, it's, I appreciate it. One of the great benefits of this week to week is I get counsel like that, and very, very excited about the progress I am making. And it's been wonderful.
Or you can just go out and
I was
check
gonna
out that.
say yes. We can just go out and buy Zocology, the book. It's coming out May 19th. I know you're doing press interviews galore about it, and I'm so happy for you. And I know it's going to be a huge success. And another great week here on Tough Lies.
Thanks. Always a pleasure being with you, Colin.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week. Just a reminder, follow us, like, subscribe, stop people on the street, skywrite, whatever you got to do. Tough Lies Podcast.transistor.fm, at Tough Lies Podcast on Instagram, and look forward to more great discussions, and we'll talk to you next week.
Join us next week on the Golfers Podcast with Richard Zokel and Colin McDougall.